Okay, so I'm continuing on my what feels like a movie review of a movie made in 1962, I think, called The Innocents. Mm, yes, we are experiencing ourselves, and yes, the Matrix is experiencing us. That was left. Comment, yes, this is so. I think that is putting it very simply, um, but I personally prefer to choose who I share my thinking, feelings, and thoughts with, and certainly my experiences. I personally don't choose to share my thoughts, my feelings, and my experiences with everyone in the whole world. No. I choose the human beings that I would share my thinking, my feelings, and my thoughts with. You know, you normally don't mind sharing your intimate thoughts and feelings and emotions with a very close friend or another real human being, which probably should be your friend. You don't share it with a parasite or a predator. You don't give your secrets to a predator. The deer shouldn't tell its whereabouts and its secrets to the lion, etc., etc., whatever species you are, because in the Matrix, all is not one, contrary to the fantasy world that we think we are living in. That is not the reality, and has not been the reality, and we all know it is not the reality. And if it ever was the reality, it is only where nature shares with nature. Human beings are nature, so they can share with nature, all things being equal. But this world has changed. But human beings should not share with anything except that which is natural. In my view, okay? I just thought I'd throw that in there. It may not make any sense, you know. And of course, in the reality that you're in a matrix, which is an artificial domain anyway, that is impossible now. So, like I've said in previous videos, you're a fish out of water. You're in an unnatural environment. You're not in an environment where, yes, you are one with the world at all, and your experiences, are being shared by the Matrix. Yes, the Matrix is experiencing you. And you are experiencing the Matrix if you are unlucky. But either way, you are experiencing the Matrix because the Matrix is all around. All I meant was that if the Matrix becomes negative, then your experiences will be negative. Anyway, I've gone off that and I'm leaving that alone. But a valuable comment. At any rate, also the cognitive dissonance, yes. Another valuable idea, but I won't go on to that because I'll have to read the comment again because it is accurate 100%, of course, but it's actually going over my head because it has even more than what I would say, because I keep things simple and all this is new to me. You know, I understand things, but I don't always know the terms, you know. But you have to use terms to get your idea across, and it makes it easier because then you can see something like even in a movie. You can see where some people are not able to accept reality, you know, and that's essentially it. They don't, you know, this is the problem. And this is the problem for me too, because my reality has been shattered. You know, because if the matrix exposes itself completely, that's showing you a reality that you weren't aware of. You know, if you think you're living in a natural world and then you become aware that you're living in an artificial one, you know that, and then you are also of the mind that you don't choose to be technological and you don't think you are, and that then you even more realize that it is not a benefit, it is not healthy, it is not normal, and that it is, yes, you know, it is going to take from you. The matrix will take from you, not give to you. The matrix is not about giving to a human being. The matrix is about taking from a human being. Many people think that technology gives to them. I'm not one of those, you know, so it is still opinion. And, you know, if you like living in a negative matrix, not that you have any choice. So this is another thing too, because the matrix, because we are dependent on the matrix, and because it is all around and everyone is part of it. You know, it is very difficult or near impossible to separate from it. You know, as I've said before, so even if you don't agree with it or don't like every aspect of it or any aspects of it or some aspects, you know, it is very difficult to separate from it. And if you do, yes, you will be an outcast. And also, you know, because the matrix is very much of the idea we are one and one for all, and this kind of mentality. That's from a movie too, by the way, All for One and One for All. That's been around a long time. So it's interesting how long the matrix has been showing its hand in a way, but we just don't see it. You know, the matrix is not about individuality or individuals. It may promote that, but if it does, then that means that everyone must be an individual, you know. In other words, you know, if you're different and you think you're an individual, then eventually everyone will join together in being individual or different. I've gone off the track here. I must get back on track. Where am I? That's a good question. I'm in a matrix, so of course I don't know where I am, and I don't know what I'm doing because I'm out of touch with reality. I'm out of touch with my natural resources. I'm out of touch with the natural world. That's assuming that there is a natural world. You know, I make the fantasy video, right? And if you listen to them, you can see that I acknowledge that the world is not natural. But at the same time, I say human beings are natural. Because it would be reasonable to probably assume that if everything is not natural, if everything is technical, because there again I don't understand these things, then if you are part of that, you know, because before in the old world we just thought everything was organic or natural, all of the same material, all of the same substance. We might be different to other life forms, we might be different even to other human beings, but we're still of the same substance. So some might say, well, look, if we're in a matrix, and it's artificial and it's technical or it's this or that, you know. Well, that's why I say we're in an alien world, because, you know, I do not go with that. I don't go with that we're part of this technological matrix. I don't say we're the same substance as it. But I'm obviously missing something or getting something wrong. But then again, you know, could you still be what you are, but be in an environment that is at odds with you? And that's why I think that's something against all odds. Against all odds, where does that come from? I'm not sure. But that is why humans are literally against all odds. Working against all odds, if I'm making sense here. I'm sure I'm not. You know, because, you know, you're not going to get anything from the Matrix except Matrix technology. And technology is at odds with a natural, normal human being, I would think. Anyway, I'm going to go off that, because otherwise I'll just be going way off into fairyland and making no sense. I just wanted to acknowledge the couple of comments. I normally don't. Not that I get many anyway, but I do remember getting one a long time ago that was also excellent, in the sense that I didn't even get to read the whole thing, but the little bit that I read of it, you know, about the vibration and the sending of vibration and the receiving. It was like putting my ramblings of hours and hours of hours into a couple of paragraphs so succinctly and perfectly and clearly and correctly, much better than what I could, and much more accurate in a way, because even I was airy-fairy a bit. You know, like at that time I'm like, I know this and I think it's true, but I don't see it. I know it's not happening, you know, so you get into that real confused state like I do. But it's like saying, you know, like I was talking about tram lines and something like that, but things can, not everyone, oh, there again, yeah, will your system be all right? Well, that's an interesting thing from that song. Will your system be all right? Well, your system, you see, is your apparatus. That's right. Is it able to send? Is it able to receive anything? You know, and, you know, obviously, if you're in a matrix that degenerates the human being and makes the human being degenerate instead of, you know, instead of flourishing and reaching its true potential, or just to be a normal human being, in my view. You know, to me, if you're a human being and that's a spiritual being, but you have abilities, but your abilities are not being used by you, or you're unaware of your abilities, or your abilities are being used more by the matrix, then, you know, you are not at any beneficial level in this matrix as a human being. You're not benefiting yourself. You're only benefiting, you know, a parasitic mind that is feeding off you. It's like being in a one-sided relationship. Essentially, being in a matrix, if you're a human being, is the same as being in a completely one-sided relationship where the other person takes everything from you but gives you nothing in return. And in fact, will do that and will ultimately hope that you're gone. You know, doesn't want to continue the relationship forever with you anyway. Not unless you are reduced to nothing and it takes all the credit and all the glory and all the... I saw a t-shirt yesterday on a girl. I don't know why this is not relevant, but perhaps someone could tell me what it means. because it took my mind, because the word glory I just used, and it was like written on the front of this girl's t-shirt, trade your passion for glory. I thought that was interesting. I wondered what it meant. You trade your passion for glory. I'm not sure that I could go with that, because if I trade my passion or my feelings and my thinking for anything at all, then, I'm not going to be a human being, am I? I'm not going to be able to create in the reality, because my passion and my thinking and my feelings is part of the thought process, or that ability. Like I say, we're spiritual beings. Our thought and thinking combined with feelings and emotions, and yes, passion, if you want to look at it that way, creates the reality. Without those emotions and feelings, the thinking is like the matrix. It is technical. The matrix God entity and its collaborative world, matrix, whatever, is all technical. It's all thinking. It doesn't put the emotion or the passion into it. It would use those words and use those ideas, and it has its own version of passion, but its passion is only to play the game and to win the game. If you really look at it that way, it's an objective rather than a passion. But it is, well, I suppose it's a passion for it. I don't know. How would I know? It's very hard to understand the thinkings of different animals. They have a different way of looking at their survival and their world. And it's the same with human beings. If you're talking about technological gods and you're talking about all these different things, it's very hard to get into that mindset, because it's the reverse. Like I say, we're in a reverse world, so it's the reverse of what a human being is and how a human being basically thinks and operates. So even at a low level, you're aware that is not, that it's not something that you can really fully comprehend, nor should you, because it's not something that, they, or on the other hand, it wants to comprehend the human being. It's a parasite, so, it's a mind parasite. So it takes from the human being in order to keep this reality going. It's an illusion reality, so it has to be kept going with a lot of illusion that only the human being can really provide. Otherwise, the stark technical reality would be too much for most human beings, I think. But I don't know. They're probably getting used to it now anyway, I would imagine. Just as, you can get used to, just like you're used to living at the low level. We don't know what it's like to be at a higher level. I've known nothing but suppression, so how would I know what it even feels like to not be suppressed? I only talk about the matrix now as something that I see as negative, but it's not like I'm seeing the positive aspects of the human being in many ways, because, the suppression is so very ingrained in us, and there is so much of it, and the world is now a total matrix. Even if, like I've said before, even if you wanted to take it, and I'll go back to the movie because that goes back to a more distant time where things are more normal and more natural, but even in a natural world, even some of the movies that I talk about, they're in a supposedly non-technological natural world because they're in the past. But, that is the whole purpose of, I think the purpose, I'm losing the plot here, as you can see. I think the purpose of talking about the older times and the older movies is that, look, it's still a matrix, even back then. But it appears to be a more natural matrix. Maybe it was. Doesn't matter. But there were still dark forces operating, like in The Innocents. There were still things that you couldn't see. So you still had behind the scenes and the reality that you see in front. And you still had, technological beings operating to try to take over, control, use, or, in other words, possess the human being for their own benefit or for their ends or for their needs, like in The Innocents. And I've lost the plot here. Goodness gracious. See, in The Innocents, the two children, Flora and Miles, the two little children, are possessed. They are possessed by the unseen spirits to most, except for them and the governess, who, because, yes, she has imagination, so therefore she can see the truth, and therefore she can see the spirits. This may or may not be what the movie means. There could be many ways, as I've said before, to look at a movie. I'm just taking it from this one angle at this moment. Already in my mind I'm seeing another angle coming, so I'm aware of that. So if you don't watch the movie, it's probably it doesn't matter, because you're gonna go with my scenario, shall we say, or what my ramblings are about it. But and okay, so at one stage the governess, the main character in the movie, the lady, says, yes, the children are possessed because she can see the spirits. These spirits that have possessed the two children, Flora and Miles can see the two spirits. They not only can see the two spirits, a man and a woman, who were their previous carers, shall we say, the previous governess and the previous gentleman that ran the estate, shall we say, and looked after the two children, or was supposed to look after the two children. I say supposed to because these two people or beings, depending on how you see it, because I'm already starting to see it differently even as I speak. This just come to me this very second, which is very interesting. I personally would say that the two previous people or beings, the previous governess, the previous gentleman that ran the estate or the mansion house where they lived, I would now say, and this just come to me this very second, that they also were possessed. They were possessed while they were living. Then they both died. The gentleman died accidentally, supposedly, Though even the housekeeper says, oh, he was a very strange man, who knows what really happened, but he supposedly died on the doorsteps drunk and fell over and hit his head. The other governess that was living there with him fell in love with him. And so when he died, she killed herself because she could not stand living without him. And she knew that if she killed herself, she could be with him in the invisible world, shall we say, or on the other side. This is like a ghost story, so this is how we're taking the movie. This is the movie, okay? But like the little girl said, if you are not real good, she said this to the governess, because the governess said, say your prayers and you'll go to heaven. All good girls go to heaven. And she said, well, what if I'm not a good girl? Because she knew she wasn't. Because she knew she was collaborating and still had ties with the negative spirits. So she said, what if I'm not a good girl? Won't I then just be left here on earth to walk around in the invisible domain? Because she knew that the other two that she idolised, she and Miles, the two children, idolised these two previous carers of theirs. They saw them as mother and father. They were their surrogate or their substitute mother and father, and it probably became quite real to them. So they liked them, they loved them, and so they they knew them, they became like them because they were possessed. Then they corrupted the children with their possession and with what they were, because they were kind of negative. They showed the children negative things. The children shouldn't see, perhaps even, because the children, as the movie says, trailed along behind them like little ducklings, idolising them and seeing them intimately, shall we say, which, children, should only see intimate things if they are positive. You shouldn't show children negative things, because otherwise then you're infecting the children with negative ideas, negative thoughts, and that's how the Matrix essentially works too, because everything is of the Matrix. And if you have negative beings, they infiltrate the world and they infect with the negative mind parasite. And that is like a virus that spreads. And, and then you have a technologically operated, infected matrix, which is what the world is. Because technology has infected the matrix. Technology is a virus. Technology is a disease. Human beings are meant to not have disease. They're not meant to have viruses. They're not meant to have technology. It infects them and causes illness, disease, viruses. Human beings are swimming in a virus, a parasitic virus. That sounded very fancy, actually. I can't believe that I make sense to anyone. But I guess that's because then you break it down like the comments, because I can't break things down. But either way, I think I'm not doing a very good job of this movie that I was hoping to do a good job of, because I do think it's a good film. And, even though it's a Matrix movie, obviously, the Matrix enlightens, but that is then sometimes distressing. So therefore the vibration ain't so good. I just made that point because, like I said, I would have enjoyed this movie years and years ago, but I get more out of it now, but in some respects it's very hard for me to enjoy the movies at the simple superficial level now. And but either way, I've gone off the track. I've got to get back to the movie. Have I got something around here that can get me on track? Yeah, well, look, either way, see, with that movie, when you're talking about possession, and I don't know what I'm talking about. What do I know about possession? Very little, really. Do you need an exorcist if you are possessed? Do you need, should you try to expel or exorcise the demons of possession, shall we say, because that's how it is from horror movies or from The Exorcist or whatever. Should you try? Well, you see, this is the point of this movie too. You have many little things going on here. When the governess finds out that the children are possessed, she says. They're possessed. She realises it. She's seen the two dead people living and walking and still in contact with the children. They need the children to interact with one another in the real world. They want to be real. They want to get back to the material world because they are possessed, and possessed beings like a technological world. They like a very material world. They have to get back to that. They need that to be more physical, and it being more physical, they can be more negative. They use the physical world to be negative, to be dirty, to create filth, to contaminate in the movie. Yes, that was the word they used. Possessed beings, possessed people contaminate others. That was why Miles was expelled from school, because the school said we cannot have him here because he's a negative for the other children. He will contaminate the other children, As the spirits or the previous carers of Miles and Flora, the two man and woman that were lovers. Essentially what happened was, I would imagine, was that the carer and controller of the estate, because he was given full authority to, operate and care for the children and the entire estate. His name was Peter Gint in the movie, so I'll use names just because otherwise it gets too confusing. He was given complete authority by the guardian of the rich gentleman that owned the estate, that had that was the guardian essentially of Flora and Miles, the two young children. He gave full authority to Peter Gynt at the time over the entire estate and the children and all the servants and everything. So his word was law, you could say. And he was possessed, I now would say, just this very, in the process of making this movie. He was possessed by other mind parasites, if you like. And he seduced Mary Jessel, the governess that was with him at the time, the governess of the children. He seduced her and corrupted her into also becoming possessed, because she fell in love with him, because she was a different person, more or less, as the housekeeper told the governess that's now in the living world, shall we say, in the movie. Saying she says to her, she was such a happy, kind person when she first came here, and then she changed because of her association with a possessed being, or a possessed person, if you like. He corrupted her. He turned her from a happy-go-lucky, kind person into someone that accepted negativity and enjoyed negativity. That's the power of seduction. And that's essentially what happens through this movie. You have the seduction of possessed people or beings, seducing others, corrupting them, contaminating them, as the movie said. All these words are used in the movie, into becoming like them, or joining forces with them, you could say, whether it be through love or through, their own needs. And this is, I've lost the plot here, and this is essentially, I'm trying to compare it to the Matrix. This is essentially what happens. Human beings get seduced and corrupted by the Matrix people, by the Matrix entities, by the Matrix demigods, all those that are around them. They believe that, and it is a virus that has spread all over the earth. In fact, it is the earth, apart from human beings. But they can be contaminated and possessed too, which is like in the movie. There's this process, because the two young children, that's why the movie is called The Innocents. The two children are innocents. That's what the title is, that's what the movie is. Even the housekeeper says, well, they are innocents, but they look innocent. They look angelic, as the lady said. And they were once, but they became possessed by the others. The Others. That's another movie that touches on this type of thing too, The Others. Because there is the people that you can see, and then there are the others. That which you can't see, if you want to look at it that way. They're negative, dark spirits that can't leave this reality because they are too low frequency. And this is a low frequency reality. They can't live in another frequency or another vibration because they can't hold it. They are not of it. Human beings are meant to be, as I say, of a certain vibration. That is why most of us are probably stuck here. That's probably why I'm stuck in a low vibration, because I'm low vibration, you see. But I don't choose to be low vibration. the matrix seduces and corrupts and contaminates and controls. Because, for some people, I would think there is a choice about possession. See, Flora and Miles, the two young children, and their innocence, that's right. So it's very hard to say, like whether they have as much choice as an adult. But then again, we have adults now who are really children in adults' body in some ways too now, which is very much also like the Matrix, God and its minions. Because, the psychopath is really a child, but with the devious and intelligent minds at its disposal to, operate in the Matrix. It's very hard to explain, but it's like a child being very naughty and being allowed to do what it wants, but it doesn't comprehend. A child, when it's naughty, doesn't really comprehend if it does something negative. It doesn't fully understand if it causes damage, or if it's not totally aware of consequences till you get to a certain age. But and it delights in being naughty. Children delight in being naughty to some extent, and it's very hard to explain, but you can have adults that delight in being naughty too, because they haven't matured past that stage of the enjoyment they get out of being naughty. But they're adults, so they've got an adult mind, an adult intelligence to be able to play different naughty games, shall we say. They're not going to be playing the same way they played when a kid, but they're going to play at an adult level, but they've still got the same mindset, that they can do what they like, that they can cause havoc, that they can be naughty. There are no consequences, and they get a big buzz out of it. They get a big thrill out of it. It makes them happy. It makes them feel alive. Makes them feel alive, because often children behave very naughty when they're a bit suppressed too, I think. And so then it makes them feel that they've got some power, that they're alive, when they do something naughty. And if they get away with it, it makes them feel even more that way. It's very hard to explain, but children do that. We did it when we were kids, a lot of us. I know I did, on occasion, when I was given the opportunity. But I did see it as a form of, because I did see it as a reaction to suppression though, whereas, because children are suppressed to some extent because they're controlled by their parents and by society and by school and all these sorts of things and by authority. Supposedly you aren't allowed to be truly autonomous or free until you get to a certain age. Of course, it's rather distressing to realise that is never going to happen because you're in a matrix, but you don't actually realise that. You actually think that's why a lot of children, I think, actually some of us actually do when we grow up, think, why did I want to grow up? I thought it would be so much better. I would have so much more power. I would have so much more freedom. But in reality, you're still in a matrix. So actually you have probably less in some ways, because at least when you're a child, you're not responsible for your actions. You have a certain amount of protection, or you should have, from your parents, etc. But either way, I've gone off the track there. That's not relevant at all, and probably not even true. Because for everything I say, I see a counter to it. Because sometimes, even when you're talking about childhood and adulthood, you're talking about some sort of ideal, or some sort of idea that you have of what a family or a reality should be, and it is not the true reality at all half the time. In fact, most of the time. But anyway, because how could you know? You only know your own experience, or maybe a few others if you're if you have access to other people. But either way, I'm getting too confused here, far too confused. So I suppose, Flora and Miles were seduced by these two benevolent spirits or people that were essentially using the two children.